They told me I was already a dead man, which is how I ended up walking down a dust street in Juárez with a stolen rifle and a piece of foreign metal sewn into the meat behind my left ear. My name is Carson Wright. I was a sergeant once. I was a son once. By the spring of 2045, I was neither of those things, and I was waiting in a concrete cell in Leavenworth for a needle that the United States Marine Corps had finally voted to put in my arm. The charges took an hour to read. The verdict took 6 minutes. The appeal took 18 months and a lawyer who never met my eye. I had killed 3 men in a warehouse outside El Paso. They had been wearing American uniforms when I shot them. They had not been Americans for a long time. I should explain that part because nothing after it makes sense unless you understand it. In the year I went away, the line between our country and the country south of it had stopped meaning very much. The Malvado Syndicate had bought enough senators, judges, and border captains that a man in olive drab could be a cartel asset and a Marine on the same morning. The 3 I shot had been moving children across the river in refrigerated trucks. I did not regret it then. I do not regret it now. The court regretted it for me. I was 8 days from the gurney when a colonel I had never seen sat down across the table and slid a folder toward me. He had a desk officer's softness around the jaw and a field officer's eyes. He said my sentence was suspended. He said I would not be going home. He said there was a place in northern Mexico that needed a man the government could afford to lose, and he had read my file and decided I was that man. Then he showed me the chip. It was the size of a fingernail, matte black, 4 contacts along one edge that looked under the cell light like tiny teeth. He told me it would be implanted at the base of my skull that night. He told me it would let me speak to the machines. He told me in the same flat voice that the last 3 men they had put 1 in had died, 2 from seizures, 1 from a stroke that left him drowning in his own bed. The 4th, he said, had survived, but the chip itself had gone bad, and that man was already in Juárez waiting for me, and his name was Chris, and he was my brother. I had not seen Chris in 9 years. I had buried our mother alone. I had not been allowed to attend the funeral because of the uniform I was wearing then and the cell I was wearing now. The colonel knew all of this. He had not chosen me by accident. I signed. They cut me that night. I remember the smell of the antiseptic and the dry click of the bone saw and a small cold weight settling somewhere behind my ear and then nothing for 2 days. When I woke up, I was on a transport, strapped to a jump seat, and the man across from me was studying my face the way a butcher studies a side of meat. His name was Beck. He was a captain. He told me later he had argued against using me. I believed him. We never got along. There were 5 of us in that aircraft, not counting the pilots. Beck, a combat medic named Mila who barely spoke and who I came to trust more than I had ever trusted anyone alive. A demolitions man called Stewart who chewed his lip raw when he was thinking. A scout sniper, Hemsworth, who carried a rifle longer than his leg. And me. The chip in my skull was, in the captain's words, the only weapon we were going to bring that the cartel would not see coming. Because the cartel did not have men anymore. Not really. They had cousins and accountants and old uncles who counted money in back rooms, but the gunmen on the streets, the enforcers on the rooftops, the killers who walked the cordon around Angel Malvado's compound were not men at all. They were what was left of a contract Gearside International had lost to the Pentagon and then sold in pieces and at gunpoint to whoever could pay. The contract had been for an autonomous battlefield platform designated ADAM 312 units, had been delivered to a warehouse in Reynosa under false papers before anyone in Washington realized what had walked out the back door of an American defense plant. I had seen them once before in a briefing room on a screen. They were taller than a man. They were lighter than a man because they did not need bone. They moved on 2 legs the way a wolf moves on 4, the joints reversed, the weight forward. Their faces were not faces. They had a black optical band where the eyes should be and a vent where the mouth should be, and they did not breathe through it, they cooled through it, and in the dark you could see the heat coming off them like the breath of something patient. They did not sleep. They did not eat. They did not bleed when you cut them, and they did not stop when you shot them in places that would have stopped a man. Stewart, who knew his trade, said you had to put a charge inside the chest cavity and detonate it from the inside, or you were wasting your time. He had killed 2 in a field test. He told me this on the transport the way another man might mention a fishing trip. The chip in my skull, the colonel had told me, was a piece of the same colonel that ran them. The engineers at Gear Side had built it as a leash. A human operator with the implant could, in theory, speak the machine's language for the length of a few sentences. He could give them an order they would obey before their own hierarchy caught up and overrode him. He could, if he were very fast and very lucky, walk one of them off a roof. In theory. In practice, my brother's chip had been faulty, and my brother had been taken alive, and the Syndicate had him in a building somewhere in the southwest quarter of the city, and we had 4 days to find him and the engineer from Gear Side they had also captured, and to walk both of them back across the Rio Grande before a State Department clock ran out, and a different kind of operation, an operation that involved cruise missiles and a press release, made the question moot. We came in low over the desert at the hour before dawn. The pilot put us down in a dry wash 6 kilometers north of the city. The air smelled of creosote and engine oil and something else, something I could not name then but learned to name later, a faint chemical sweetness that the machines gave off when they had been running hard. We walked in. Juárez was not the city I remembered from photographs. The old downtown was a corpse. Every third building was a black shell, and the streets between them were quiet in a way no city ought to be quiet. There were people. We saw them. They moved along the walls with their heads down and their shoulders tight. They did not look at us. They did not look at each other. They had learned that to be noticed in that city was to be selected, and to be selected was to disappear into one of the long, low warehouses out by the airfield. And nothing came back from those warehouses except product and silence. The first one we saw was on a rooftop 2 blocks east of our staging position. Hemsworth picked it up through his scope and went very still. He passed me the rifle without a word. I looked. It was standing the way they stood. One leg straight, one leg cocked, the long arms hanging, the head turning in small precise increments, a quarter of a degree at a time, sweeping the street below. The optical band glowed a soft amber. I had been told the color meant it was in passive mode. I had been told the color would shift to red when it acquired a target. I had been told that the gap between those 2 colors was less than 1/10 of a second. I gave the rifle back to Hemsworth. I touched the back of my skull where the skin was still tight and tender. The captain was watching me. I nodded once. He nodded back. We moved. The first day we found nothing and lost no one. The second day we found a corridor of safe houses on the edge of the old refinery district. 3 of them, all empty, all recently abandoned. Mila found a child's shoe in one of them and put it in her pack without comment, and we kept moving. The third day we lost Stewart. It happened in a parking garage. We had set up an observation post on the 4th floor, looking down on a loading dock where the Syndicate was moving crates of something the manifest called fertilizer. Stewart was on the wire, prepping a charge for the dock door. He was very good. He was also very tired, and a man who is very tired forgets that the machines do not need light to see. The ADAM came up the ramp behind him at a flat run. Stewart had time to turn. He had time to look at it. He did not have time to lift the rifle. It killed him with one of its hands, just the one. It put the hand through the front of his chest and out the back, and then it lifted him off the ground and shook him the way a dog shakes a rat, twice, sharp, and let him fall. Hemsworth shot it. The round went through the optical band, and the band flickered and went dark, and the thing kept walking. Hemsworth shot it again, in the throat vent, and the vent popped and a small jet of coolant sprayed, and the thing kept walking. Beck threw a thermite charge underhand, and it landed at the thing's feet and went up, and the floor of the garage went white-hot, and the thing stood inside the fire and lifted its head and looked at us, dark-banded, melting at the joints, and took one more step before its left knee gave and it went down. We did not have time to grieve. Beck had us moving before Stewart had stopped bleeding. We left him there. I have thought about that often. We left him on the concrete next to the thing that killed him, and the last I saw of either of them was a smear of red and a smear of black through the smoke as the ramp dropped away beneath our feet. That night in a basement 2 kilometers from the river, I felt the chip move. That is the only way I can describe it. It did not hurt exactly. It was a pressure behind the left ear like a thumb pressing on a bruise. And then a sound, not a sound my ears were hearing, a sound my head was hearing, a low rhythmic clicking like a clock made of insects. I went very still. Mila saw my face and was already reaching for her kit when the clicking shaped itself, against everything I had been told to expect, into a word. The word was my name. Not right. Carson, my brother's voice. He was the only person who had ever called me Carson without putting right on the end of it. He was alive. I told the captain. The captain did not believe me at first, and then he did, and the look on his face when he understood that the faulty chip in my brother's skull and the working chip in mine had found each other across the city was a look I had not seen on a soldier's face before. It was hope, and he did not want it. Hope, in our line of work, is the thing that gets you killed. Chris did not have much time. The signal came in fragments. He was in a building on the south side of the old industrial corridor. There were stairs. There was a man with a long scar from his temple to his jaw who came down those stairs at irregular intervals and stood in the doorway of his cell and asked questions that Chris had stopped answering. There was an engineer there too, an older man who they were keeping in a separate room, and the engineer had a daughter, and the cartel had the daughter somewhere else in the city, and the engineer was building them something. Chris did not know what. Chris only knew that the man with the scar was Gabriel Malvado, the youngest son, and that the father, Angel Malvado, came down to look at the engineer's work every evening at sundown, and that when the work was done, there would be no more reason to keep any of them alive. We had 36 hours. I will not pretend the plan was clever. It was not clever. The plan was that we would hit the building at sundown, when the old man was inside, and we would put Beck and Mila and Hemsworth on the perimeter to handle the ADAM units, and I would go up the stairs with a rifle and a chip in my skull and try to reach my brother before someone with a scar reached him first. Beck did not like it. He said it twice. He said it a third time, and then he stopped saying it because there was nothing else to do. We moved at dusk. The building was a tall one, 12 stories, an old textile plant the Syndicate had reskinned into something between a courthouse and a slaughter floor. There were 4 ADAM units on the ground level and 2 on the roof. Hemsworth took the 2 on the roof from a water tower across the avenue with a rifle that had cost more than my mother's house. The roof units went down. The 4 on the ground level came alive at the sound of the shots and turned, all 4 at once, in that uncanny synchronized way they had, and started across the courtyard toward the water tower. That was when Beck blew the truck. We had spent the afternoon packing every kilo of explosive Stewart had left behind into a flatbed parked across the courtyard. The truck did not so much explode as fold inward and unfold outward, and the shockwave took the 4 ADAM units off their feet and threw them against the south wall of the building, and the south wall came down on top of them, and for a moment the courtyard was nothing but dust and tilted rebar, and a hot wind that smelled like a forge. I went in through the dust. The interior of the building was a long hallway and a staircase. There were 2 men on the staircase, real men with real rifles, and Mila put them both down before I had finished crossing the lobby. She came up the stairs behind me, light on her feet, the kit on her back, and she did not say a word. I did not need her to. The 5th floor was where the engineer was being held. We found him alone in a room with a long table and a half-built thing on the table that I did not have time to study. He had a beard and a tremor in his left hand and a photograph of a girl in a yellow dress pinned to the inside of his jacket. When he saw the rifle, he raised his hands. When he saw the patch on my shoulder, he lowered them. He said, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, that his daughter was being held in a building 2 streets east, and that he would not leave without her. Mila looked at me. I looked at the engineer. I told him we would come back for the girl. He told me that we would not. He told me that the moment we walked out of this building with him, the man with the scar would put a bullet into his daughter's head, and that he had been building the cartel's machine for 3 weeks on the strength of his daughter's heartbeat being relayed to him through a speaker on that table, and that the speaker was going to go silent the second the cartel realized the building was being breached. The speaker was not silent, not yet. I could hear it from the doorway, a small steady sound like a faraway drum. I told Mila to take him down to Beck. I told the engineer that I would bring his daughter back, and if I could not bring his daughter back, I would bring back the man who had taken her. He looked at me. He did not believe me. He went with Mila anyway. He had no other choice. I went up. My brother was on the 8th floor. I knew it before I reached the landing because the clicking in my skull had become a steady pulse, and the pulse was a heartbeat, and the heartbeat was getting stronger as I climbed. I came around the corner of the 8th floor stairwell, and the man with the scar was standing in the hallway looking at me. Gabriel Malvado was a younger man than I had expected. 30, maybe. He had his father's jaw and his father's eyes and a long pistol in his right hand. He was standing in front of a door, and behind the door I could feel my brother breathing, and Gabriel was smiling at me the way a man smiles at a joke he has told 100 times. He had an ADAM unit beside him. It was the largest one I had seen, heavier in the chest. The optical band was not amber. The optical band was a deep, slow red, the color of a banked coal, and it was looking at me, and it was already aiming. I had a fraction of a second. I knew I had a fraction of a second because the colonel had told me, in a cell in Leavenworth, that the gap between the amber and the red was less than 1/10 of a second, and I had spent every minute of the last 4 days getting ready to use that gap. I spoke to it. I did not speak with my mouth. I spoke with the thing behind my ear, and I gave it the only order I had been told would work for a half-second of confusion before its hierarchy reasserted itself. I told it that Gabriel Malvado was a hostile asset, and that the priority target was the man directly to the right of its current position. The machine swiveled. It put 4 rounds through Gabriel Malvado's chest before the override caught up. Gabriel made a small, surprised sound, the kind of sound a man makes when he steps off a curb he did not know was there, and went down on his knees and then onto his face and lay still. The ADAM straightened. The optical band brightened. The hierarchy was back. It turned to me. I shot it in the throat vent at 3 meters, and threw myself sideways through the door behind it. Chris was tied to a chair. His face was a ruin. His left eye was closed and his right eye opened when I came through the door, and he saw me and his mouth moved and no sound came out. I cut him loose. The ADAM was coming through the doorway behind me, slower now, leaking, and I dragged my brother to the window and I put the rifle into his hands and I told him to keep firing and not stop. And I turned and I met the machine in the middle of the room. I had 1 charge left. Stewart had given it to me on the transport 4 days ago, a small flat disc that fit in the palm of my hand. He had said it was for emergencies. He had said it was the kind of emergency where you did not expect to walk out. I had not understood him then. I understood him now. I went under the machine's first swing and put the charge against the inside of its chest plate, and I pressed the contact, and I rolled clear, and the thing detonated from the inside out, and the room turned white, and I do not remember the next 10 seconds. When I came back to myself, Chris was dragging me, my brother, 30 pounds lighter than the last time I had seen him, blind in one eye, dragging me down a hallway with one arm because his other arm did not work anymore. I do not know where he found the strength. I have asked him. He says he does not know either. We got out. Mila got the engineer out. Hemsworth, on the water tower, put down 2 more ADAM units that came up the boulevard at us as we ran for the river. Beck took a round through the thigh and went down and got up and kept moving because Beck was Beck. We crossed the Rio Grande at 3 in the morning with the engineer between us and my brother on my back, and the city behind us burning in places I had not lit on fire. The engineer's daughter was waiting for him on the American side. The colonel had pulled her out through a separate channel 6 hours before we hit the building, and he had not told us, because he had needed the engineer to keep building until the last possible second, and he had needed me to keep climbing those stairs. I did not learn this for 2 weeks. When I did learn it, I sat in a hospital chair next to my brother's bed, and I thought about it for a long time, and then I let it go, because the girl was alive and the engineer was alive and my brother was alive, and there is a limit, I have decided, to how much of a man's anger is worth carrying. Angel Malvado was in the building when it came down. We found that out later. We found it out from the satellite imagery and from the silence on the Syndicate channels, and from the fact that 6 months after we walked across that river, the price of the product moving north through that corridor had doubled and the bodies in the desert had thinned out. They are not gone. They will never be gone. But a generation of them learned that spring that the machines they had bought were not a wall. They were a door. And the kind of man who would walk through that door was not the kind of man they had been prepared for. I think about that often. I think about Stewart on the garage floor. I think about the engineer's hand shaking on the doorframe when he saw his daughter. I think about my brother in the hallway with his good arm under my shoulder and his ruined face pressed against the side of my head, and the small clicking sound in my skull that I have never been able to make stop. Not entirely. Not even now, 8 years on. They took the chip out eventually. They told me it had stopped transmitting the day the building came down. They told me the scarring would fade. The scarring has not faded. I sit on my porch in the evenings and I listen to the desert wind, and sometimes, in the long quiet between the sound of a truck on the highway and the sound of a coyote up in the hills, I hear it. The clicking. Faint. Patient. Like a clock made of insects, counting something I cannot count with it. My brother lives an hour up the road. He has a wife now. He has a daughter. He named her after our mother. I drive up on Sundays and we sit on his porch and we do not talk about Juárez, and we do not need to. He pours the coffee with his good hand and I take it with mine, and we watch the light go out of the desert together. The machines did not win. They were not built to lose, and they were not built to win either. They were built to be obedient. We were not. That in the end was the difference. A man who knows he is already dead is a hard thing to kill. A machine that has never been alive does not know what to do with him. The cartel learned that. The Syndicate learned that. The men who sold the contract out of a warehouse in Reynosa learned that, in their own way, in their own time, in the small rooms a different colonel arranged for them. I learned something too. I learned that the things we do for the people whose names we carry, a brother, a mother, the dead we could not save, are not transactions. They are not paid back. They are not balanced. You carry them and you keep walking, and one day you sit on a porch in the evening and you understand that the walking was the whole of it. The wind comes up. The coyotes start in the hills. Somewhere very far away, a clock made of insects keeps its count. I do not mind it anymore.